They didn't take my keys away because they thought I'd cry. They took them because they knew if I stayed 5 more minutes, I'd find the hairline crack in their plan and split it end to end. My name's Kenny Harmon, 59. 2 decades and change of steel-toed mornings at Western Plains Manufacturing in Tulsa. I was the guy who could tell the difference between a healthy pump and a dying one with my eyes closed and a hand on the housing. I ran that floor 22 years without a single major accident. Not one. And my reward? A cardboard box for my family photos and a security guard who couldn't meet my eyes. It happened on a Monday that smelled like coolant and old coffee. Patricia from HR, soft voice, careful shoes, practiced empathy called me into the glass conference room the office folks liked because it made them feel closer to the floor without actually stepping on it. Waiting inside was Leonard Wright, our new operations director, 4 months on the job, a spreadsheet tan, and hands so clean they squeaked when he folded them. Kenny, Patricia started, sliding a folder across the table. We're implementing some operational changes. Market pressures, Leonard said, nodding toward a chart on his tablet. Competitive restructuring. I opened the folder. Severance summary. NDA. Non-disparagement. A map of how to disappear a man who didn't fit the latest graph. Your replacement starts tomorrow, Patricia added. Jason Weber, business degree, Oklahoma State. Very promising. I traced the wood grain in the table because my knuckles had turned white against the folder. 22 years of protocols, tribal knowledge, systems, and schedules you couldn't buy with consultant money, and they wanted me to hand it to a kid who still trusted dashboards more than his ears. I understand, I said. Leonard exhaled the way you do when your inbox just got lighter. Patricia gave me the smile they train you to give in a course with a 3-syllable name. That night, I drove the long way home, past the old riverfront where the refineries used to hiss and glow. My father had scraped out a living there until his lungs said no. A man's value, he used to tell me, isn't in what he says he can do, it's in what hums because he touched it. I'd built a place that hummed. Now they wanted to press mute. At home, I set my boots next to the door, scuffed, swan black, honest, and stared at the groove they dug in the mat over the years. I called Frank, who'd retired last spring. They're letting me go, I said. Bastards, he grunted. You gonna raise hell? No, I thought about the floor, the people, the machines that spoke in clicks and sighs. But they'll realize soon enough. Some things don't fit in a handoff binder. I started at Western Plains when my boy, Ethan, was still working on standing. The plant made industrial valves, pressure regulators, specialty flanges, small things that keep big things from exploding. At first, I ran shifts nobody else wanted: nights, holidays, tornado watch afternoons where our radios talked more than we did. After 3 years, I was a supervisor. After 7, assistant foreman. Then old Jack retired and handed me the clipboard he'd carried since Reagan. I could tell you every nickname our systems picked up over the decades. The number 3 press was Petunia because she hated cold mornings and loved a little sweetness in her hydraulic fluid ratio. The backup generator was Nemo after it survived a flooded pit in '09. We had colored tape on the floor that meant more to us than any memo ever typed. When an unfamiliar sound bounced off the rafters, someone yelled, "Kenny," and I showed up with a wrench and a question no MBA ever asks. What does your gut say? Then Axiom Partners bought us. I don't hate money men. Truth be told, I've known a couple with decent hearts. But these ones loved a graph more than a person. They have the maintenance budget and called it unlocking capital. Swapped 3 of my best mechanics for contractors with good resumes and no scar tissue. Replaced a shelf of precision spare parts with a spreadsheet of supplier lead times. Shortened safety meetings because they thought nothing that saves lives should take more than 15 minutes. 6 months back, Leonard arrived with crisp colors and the kind of enthusiasm that gets you hired by people who think change itself is a strategy. He gathered the floor for a speech. We're implementing new performance tracking, he said. Data-driven decision-making is the future of manufacturing. Afterward, Diego, my lead machinist, pulled me aside. He asked if we can modify the lockout procedure to save time, he whispered. I laughed then, because sometimes laughter is the only way to keep the bile from climbing your throat. We'll manage, I told him. We always do. I also started writing. Dates, Emails, requests for parts, denials, near misses, anything that smelled like a cost cut masquerading as efficiency. Not because I plan to fight, but because I know how fast they start when men like Leonard run out of weekends to massage the numbers. Jason Weber showed up on my second-to-last Tuesday. Shirt ironed so severe it could slice bread. Dress shoes. A tablet he checked the way a pilot checks the sky. Excited to learn from you, he said, offering me a handshake he'd practiced in a mirror. I've identified several efficiency opportunities. I gave him steel toes and safety glasses instead. Floor to first. Metrics later. For 2 weeks, I poured 22 years into him, schedules, checklists that kept us honest when we were tired, names and quirks of every long-timer who'd outlasted 3 logos and 4 plant managers. He took faithful notes. He learned the map. He did not learn the terrain. On my final Thursday, I slipped into the break room to find Jason and Leonard hunched over a spreadsheet like boys with a new toy. Once we implement the shift changes, we can consolidate 2 maintenance positions, Jason said. And the hydraulic press redundancies Kenny insists on? The manual doesn't require those extra checks. Exactly the fresh perspective we needed, Leonard said. I left before the coffee went bitter in my mouth. That afternoon, I called Diego, Alicia on assembly, Sam from maintenance, and Russell, who ran nights. We met in the far corner of the parking lot where the cameras didn't quite reach. They're going to shave time in places that used to keep us whole, I told them. If something feels off, call me, not management. Keep notes, keep records, and keep your fingers. On my last day, I handed Jason my keys. He sat in my chair the way boys sit in their father's truck, trying to fill space they haven't earned. Any last advice? He asked. Listen to the floor, I said. The machines talk. He smiled politely, as if humoring a superstition, and I knew the sound of something precious snapping. I left without a party or sheet cake. Patricia pressed a manila envelope into my palm, and the gate read my badge one last time and forgot me. But I hadn't forgotten the floor, or the way grief and responsibility can share a body. 3 weeks. That's how long it took for the first ligament in their efficiency plan to tear. Diego called whispering from the supply closet. They pushed the press inspections from weekly to biweekly. Low-risk change, Jason said. Document it, I told him. Any pressure drift, any new squeals, the color of the leak if you see one. 2 days later, Sam called. They denied the backup generator parts. Said we can wait till quarter's end. Week 4, a belt slipped on the number 3 press and shut the line for 2 hours. Week 5, a small hydraulic leak. Week 7, 3 separate electrical issues. Russell phoned after each one. New guy blames aging assets. My jaw ached from clenching. Those assets purred under proper care, and we all knew it. I wrote a measured email to Patricia and Leonard offering consultative help. Patricia replied with the kind of sugar that rots teeth. We'll reach out if needed. They didn't. At week 10, I parked across the street at lunch and waved Diego over. How bad? I asked. Bad. He stared at his boots. Production's down 15%. They fired Sam for resisting change. Jason's college buddy runs maintenance now. He called a torque wrench that twisty thing. Russell almost lost a hand when a safety interlock failed. They wrote it as operator error. I made a call to Helen Barnes at the State Industrial Safety Board. We crossed paths for years, 2 pros with different badges, but the same goal. People go home. Unannounced inspection within 2 weeks, she promised. 3 days later, Diego called again. They know you called. Someone snitched. They've got us scrubbing and fixing and forging logs like prom night alibis. The courier came that afternoon with a letter full of lawyer verbs, malicious interference, NDA, cease and desist. I slid it across Bill Henderson's desk. He's the kind of lawyer who wears boots to court because he likes to remind judges he knows real people. They can annoy you but not stop an inspection, he said. Keep your head down. Keep your notes up. The inspection came and went. Western Plains passed by the width of a hair. They tidied the obvious, Helen told me, but the documentation smells like perfume on a barn. Minor penalties. No culture change. 2 nights later, Russell knocked on my door holding the kind of cheap thumb drive that topples large men. On it, The real maintenance logs, the polished versions fed to inspectors, and emails from Axiom partners describing a cost savings initiative that treated safety as a variable expense. One line made my stomach ice over: insurance covers accidents. Missed earnings cost investors. Russell's voice shook. Kenny, Alicia's nephew, got hurt. Guard failed on the line Jason said could wait. Kid lost 2 fingers. They coerced him into signing an operator error statement while he was doped on pain meds. I stared at the documents until the numbers swam. Another inspector wouldn't fix this. This was a game of whack-a-mole with people's hands as the moles. I needed leverage, money-smelling leverage. Move 1. Coffee with George Lawson, procurement at Meridian Energy Solutions, Western Plains' biggest customer and an old friend who'd bought me more than one diner breakfast after midnight site visits. I showed him photos of valves fresh shipped with burrs sharp enough to shred gasket faces. Our QA stamped these, he whispered, horror creeping in. We'll conduct our own audit. Move 2. Helen again, this time with dates, names, logs, photographs. This isn't a squeaky bearing anymore, I said. It's a pattern. Her supervisor jumped on the call. They scheduled another inspection, deeper, broader, teeth bared. Move 3. Lunch with Jason. He looked older by 5 years and 4 months. Honestly, he said, staring into coffee he didn't drink. It's a mess. Corporate squeezes, equipment fails, and I'm not allowed to order the parts that would fix it. They set you up, I said. They needed someone who wouldn't ask why the budget doesn't include the bolts that keep the bridge up. I was told you fought modernization. What you're calling modernization is starvation. I slid a folder across. Here's what's coming. Meridian's audit, another state inspection, and a packet with everything I've collected headed to Axiom's board. You can go down as the idiot who couldn't steer, or as the guy who documented the sabotage. They'll fire me, probably, or they'll reassign you. You can still pick Hewer when you leave. He texted 3 days later, I'm in. The final push arrived on its own. The number 1 hydraulic press died at dawn. No blood this time, thank God, but it took production down with it. Leonard called me at 6:15 a.m., his voice shaped like a question he'd never wanted to ask. We need your expertise. I said yes with conditions. My team, Diego, Russell, and Alicia, full authority on repairs and parts orders, and access to 6 months of maintenance records. He agreed the way proud men agree when a fire has already eaten their favorite jacket. When I stepped back onto the floor, silence felt louder than steam. Jason met me by the dead press. Thank God, he said, and it didn't sound like a figure of speech. I crawled under the belly of the beast and felt 3 months of neglect with my palms. Heat scoring where cool should live. Filters black as midnight. Rubber starting to craze like old paint. I stood up, wiped my hands, and looked at Leonard hovering 5 feet away like he was afraid the machine might bite him. I can fix it, I said. But I just hit send on an email to the Axiom executive team, the state, and Meridian. It contains every violation, denial, and deferred repair since you landed. You need to know what broke this press wasn't a bolt, it was policy. The color left his face like someone opened a valve. You can't, it's already done, I said. You want this machine running, or do you want to keep that sentence going? For 3 days we wrenched like the old days. Diego coaxed seized fasteners with heat and patience. Alicia rebuilt a pump assembly by feel while explaining each step to Jason because I told her to teach. Russell found the cracked weld none of the kids could see because they were busy looking at data that said the weld was fine. We bled lines and bled knuckles and bled the bitterness out of the floor with work. Meanwhile, the flood I'd opened rolled in. Meridian suspended orders pending audit. The state arrived with clipboards and a mandate. Axiom sent a team with expressions like men who'd smelled smoke before they saw flames. By Friday afternoon, the press purred again. You don't forget the sound a plant makes when it exhales smiles. The corporate men called me into a small office that once held an extra pallet jack and now held suits. Thomas Whitfield, Axiom's operations fixer, extended a hand. Impressive work, Mr. Harmon. We've reviewed your report. I waited. We're implementing a comprehensive overhaul across facilities, he said. We'd like you to stay. Director of Manufacturing Operations. He named a number that would make my mortgage blush. I looked at the window where I could see Alicia measuring with new eyes. "You're still thinking in quarters," I said. "Safety thinks in generations." I shook my head. "I'll consult 3 days a week. My rate. I pick the team. I set the schedules, and if I say we shut a line, it shuts without a committee meeting." Thomas didn't like the shape of that, but he liked the alternatives less. He nodded. Leonard was gone by Monday. Resigned, the email said, the way emails say when there's a story they hope you won't ask for. Patricia kept her job. Contrition looks better on HR than courage does, but she started visiting the floor weekly and listening more than she talked. Jason survived too, demoted on paper, but promoted in my eyes for the spine he'd grown when he could have played dumb. Meridian's audit did what it needed to do. It scared the numbers men harder than the state could. They docked Western Plains, then offered a carrot none of the suits expected, a multi-year renewal contingent on third-party oversight of safety and quality, paid by Western Plains, with veto power when cutting corners smelled like profit. Axiom swallowed it like medicine you can't afford not to take. We rewrote the maintenance schedule from the ground up. Not because the old one failed, but because faith is easier when you call something new. We built a digital log that bled red when someone tried to fudge a field. We banned overtime during critical repairs so exhausted hands wouldn't do what fresh ones should. We tied supervisor bonuses to incident-free days instead of units shipped. We rehired Sam with a raise and a hell of an apology. He grunted and went back to work because that's what good men do when offered dignity. The kid whose fingers the press took came back to the floor one afternoon with his aunt, fresh bandages where knuckles used to be. We stood in a circle while he told his story haltingly, and we listened like a church. I asked Jason to speak. He did, voice steady but soft. "We failed you," he said. "We won't again." It wasn't legally vetted. It was human. And that matters more than memos. The state levied fines, big ones, for the lies before the first inspection. Axiom tried to call them unexpected expenses in an earnings call. Meridian called them tuition and reminded Axiom the class wasn't over yet. The board created a new oversight committee stocked with 2 people who'd never had to wear earplugs and 1 retired engineer named Lois, who could weld straighter than any of them could walk a line. I invited Lois to walk the floor with me weekly. She did, and she asked questions in a voice that made grown-up boys speak the truth. For months into the rebuild, a letter arrived from a lawyer representing Alicia's nephew. Western Plains settled for a number that would pay for therapy and school and a house if he wanted one. I wish it had also grown his fingers back. Money can't, but respect can keep other kids from losing theirs. 6 months in, Thomas asked to meet after hours. He looked lighter. "The board wants to name the new safety framework," he said, almost sheepish. "Marketing suggests calling it the Harmon Protocol." I took a long breath. "Call it what you want," I said, "as long as you live it when nobody's looking." He smiled the kind of smile that has a little humility in it. "We will," he said. "And not because of the fines. Because this place runs better when it's right." The plant felt different. Not the machines, they sounded the same, a chorus of honest work, but the people. Diego started teaching a class for the kids about reading a machine by ear. Alicia put her name in for a training slot at a controls course and came back speaking fluent PLC in addition to sarcasm. Russell painted a mural on the break room wall of hands, old, young, brown, pale, scarred, smooth, surrounding a single steel valve like it was a heart. Jason stopped wearing ties. He still checked his tablet, but he checked the operator's face first. "What does your gut say?" I heard him ask one morning. It made me smile into my coffee. News travels. Folks from other Axiom plants slipped me their cards, asked quiet questions about how to say no when a boss says later to a crucial repair. I told them the truth. You can grow a spine in private, but you won't use it until you stick your name on something. A couple of them did. A couple got in trouble. Those I called at night and told you did right. Sometimes that's enough to get you to morning. One afternoon, months after the worst of it, I drove the long way home again. The river shushed along, brown and stubborn like always. I pulled into the old refinery lot where my father used to stand and stare at smokestacks like they were mountains. The stacks are gone now, glass towers and dog parks rising where shift whistles used to puncture the dusk. I called Ethan. We'd been careful with each other since the divorce. He lives in Colorado Springs and builds software, easy on the hands, hard on sleep if you ask me. "How's the plant, Dad?" he asked, and I realized he'd read the articles without telling me. Kids protect their parents, too. Louder in the right ways, I said. Quieter in the wrong ones. He laughed. "You going to retire for real?" "Someday," I said. "Maybe when the machines don't talk to me anymore." He knew what I meant. "Love you," he said. "Love you more." On a Tuesday that felt like late fall, even though the calendar insisted it wasn't, Meridian held a small ceremony at the plant. Nothing fancy. Coffee and paper cups. A banner that said partnership when they could have said probation and been closer to the mark. George handed me a plaque I didn't need and said words I did. "We buy steel and we buy skill, but what keeps us buying is trust. Thank you for restoring ours." After they left, I walked the line alone. I stopped at the #1 press and put my palm on her flank. "You good?" I asked, feeling for the hum. She purred like a cat who'd forgiven but not forgotten. Machines remember the men who touch them with respect. So do people. A week later, I saw Leonard at a coffee shop downtown. He didn't see me. He was thinner and wore a suit that didn't sit right. The barista spelled his name wrong. That's not revenge. That's life. Revenge, when it comes, looks less like flames and more like a ledger that finally balances. You want the revenge moment, the clean movie cut where the guy who laughed at you learns to swallow dust? Here it is, 6 months after the press roared back to life. Axiom's board filed their quarterly. Buried in a paragraph were 4 words I read 3 times: culture and safety remediation. In plainer speech, the way we do things matters, and we forgot. In even plainer, Kenny was right. But that's not what I keep on my mantle. On my mantle sits a small brass tag we pulled from the dead press the day we brought her back, stamped WP001, nicked at the edge, burnished by 1,000 days doing a job none of the headline people knew how to respect. Next to it is a photo of our crew the day the state closed their file, masks around necks, grease on cheeks, eyes bright with a thing worth more than a bonus. Sometimes I still think about the cardboard box, about walking out past the guard who couldn't look at me, about setting my boots down by the door and wondering if the floor would miss me. It did. Floors miss the people who listen. They also punish the ones who don't. Here's what nobody teaches in business school PowerPoints. Data is a snapshot. Wisdom is the film you develop in the dark and hold up to the light to see if the picture turned out. 22 years taught me where the shadows hide. They tried to fire that. Turns out, wisdom doesn't clock out. It calls the state. It calls the customer. It calls the kid who replaced you and offers him a way to walk out a better man than he walked in. We got a new policy out of all this. They named it after me, though I told them to name it after every pair of hands that ever bled on that floor. The Harmon Protocol, the posters say, with bullet points I didn't write but philosophies I'd tattoo if I had skin left between the scars. The first line is the one that matters. If the choice is schedule or safety, safety wins. No approval required. On my first day back as a consultant, a trainee asked me why we still do the daily walk even though the sensors are new and the dashboard blinks green. I didn't give him a speech. I handed him my earplugs and said, "Close your eyes. Tell me what you hear." He listened. He smiled. "She's happy," he said, patting the casing like a shoulder. "She is," I said. "Peep her that way." Maybe wanted fire and headlines. The truth is quieter. My revenge never looked like a courtroom. It looked like a plant that purrs again, a board that reads fines like scripture, a manager who stops mid-step to ask an operator what their gut says, and a kid with 2 fewer fingers being paid enough to start a life he'd almost never get to feel built. Leonard's fence of spreadsheets toppled when it met a wrench, a whistle, and a phone call made at the right hour to the right person who remembered what the job was for. Jason learned the language of the floor. Patricia learned that empathy without spine is a kind of neglect. Axiom learned that investors sleep fine when customers trust you and workers don't lose pieces of themselves to pay for efficiency. As for me, some afternoons I still take the long way home, through the river wind and the ghost of refineries and the future we pretended arrived when we installed an app. I open my truck window and let the smell of hot metal and oil climb in because those are the smells of a life honestly spent. If you ask me what I built at Western Plains, I won't say valves or outputs or protocols. I'll say a promise. The kind a man can make and keep for 22 years and then keep keeping even after they take his keys. A promise that when a shift ends, the counting we do is of people, not units. That promise was my work. Still is. And if you ask what my reward was, I'll show you the cardboard box. It sits in the corner of my garage now, under a pegboard of wrenches and a calendar stuck on the month my life supposedly ended. Inside is a faded photo of a crew around a cake we cut when we crossed 1,000 days without an incident. Next to it is a folded email from a kid named Jason who wrote, "Thank you for not letting me be the villain of my own career." And beneath that, a note in my father's handwriting, pulled from an old toolbox the day after he died. "Take care of the machine, and it takes care of the man." We learned that lesson the hard way. Western Plains is running again now, but not the way it was when I left. There's a quiet awareness on the floor, a vigilance that wasn't there before. Diego still sends me the occasional text when something feels off. Alicia's taken it upon herself to train every new hire personally on safety lockouts, no matter what the manual says. Russell told me the other night that production's back up, but more importantly, nobody's been hurt in months. That cardboard box stays in my garage as a reminder of what I lost, of what I fought for, and of what I refused to let them take away from the people who counted on me. It's not just a box of old things. It's a ledger. Every scuffed boot print, every oil stain, every name and face is written in there in invisible ink. And if anyone ever asks me again what 22 years on the factory floor was worth, I'll point to that box. Then I'll tell them the truth. My reward wasn't what fit inside. My reward was knowing that, when it came down to it, I didn't let the machine win. I made sure it took care of the man.